I think we are online, right? Hello, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Product Tank. Tonight is a joint Product Tank of the Product Tank team Hamburg and the Product Tank team from Barcelona, and we will have speakers from San Francisco and Cologne. So first of all, let me introduce you to our group of hosts today. So from Team Barcelona, we have Loic, who will introduce the speakers later. And we have Alex, who will moderate the Q&A later. Loic is a senior PM at New Relic, and Alex is a senior PM at N26. And then for Team Hamburg, Alex is actually also part of Team Hamburg, but we also have Anja, who's a senior PM at Simasio, and she is our video operator today. And we have, last but not least, me. I'm Arne, and I'm a VP product at Zing. So for those of you who are attending Product Tank for the first time, let me briefly tell you what Product Tank is. So Product Tank is a meetup series around the world from product managers for product managers. And it's by now the biggest product community worldwide, with over 200,000 people joining their local product tanks in over 200 cities. And it's a great community right now. Since everything is online, you also have the chance of attending Product Tanks in many other cities. Like recently, I was able to watch the Product Tank in Berlin, for instance, which usually I can't attend. But since everything is online, it's practical. So watch out on mindtheproduct.com/Product Tank and find out about all the Product Tanks that are there. And Mind the Product, the organization behind Product Tank, is also organizing 5 annual conferences. And those usually happen, well, as physical conferences in locations such as London, San Francisco, Singapore, and Hamburg. But of course, due to special circumstances this year, the San Francisco event could not take place and was replaced by a digital event. And also the next upcoming conference, instead of London, is a digital event, which will be happening in the mid of November. Mind the Product also provides a lot of content around product management, sometimes also presentations from product tanks and from the conferences are being shown there. So it's a great opportunity if you're new to product or if you want to explore further to find out what's being talked about, read interesting articles. There's also a job board and all the events are being announced there. And very recently, Mind the Product also introduced a membership program, one for product managers and one for product leaders. And this membership program gives you access to even more content and special content. And for instance, also you have the opportunity in small groups to join Ask Me Anything sessions with people like Marty Kagan or Teresa Torres or Jeff Gotthelf. So really exclusive opportunities and also very nice ways of interacting with the other members of this membership program. So overall, as you see, there's a lot of things to explore in the Mind the Product community. And overall, we hope that you also find at home in this community and consider this your tribe. This is a wording that Martin Eriksson, the founder of Mind the Product, has coined because he's usually, well, mentioning this in the opening words to the Mind the Product conferences. But it's not just to consume and attend. There are also ways for you to get involved if you would like to be an active part of this community. So for instance, if you're interested in speaking at your local Product Tank event, or if you're interested in writing for the Mind the Product blog, or if in your company you want to host local events when they are happening in the physical space again, then please also have a look at mindtheproduct.com and you will find links to the respective opportunities. Tonight, we are very happy to have 2 excellent speakers for you. On one hand, we have Raffaela from Cologne, and on the other hand, we have Heike dialing in from San Francisco. And I will now hand over to Loic to introduce the 2 to you.
Thank you and welcome everyone. So our first speaker, we are very very happy to have Raffaela Hampf with us. So she's a leadership and coach, and trainer at Agile too. She has been head of commerce at Captain Sun and has a long career in product management. And she has been product lead and has different, long experience. She worked at Zalando and also in other companies from other sectors. Raffaela is going to speak about the 5 archetypes of leadership, and we walk the talk. So, thank you, Raffaela.
Thanks a lot, Vic, for the and having me talk about the topics cited about certain types of leadership and tell you first. So, following topics. What is why conversation with organization, also leadership, leadership behavior, culture for you as product, and I will walk the talk and awareness around the goal, which is called help you to discover. You may have new and years through review. But before I would also introduce quickly and leadership. And for
Raffaela, one sec. Sorry for interrupting, but your voice is super broken. We didn't hear anything. Would you mind? Probably it's best if we do it without the headphones. Can you try that real quick?
Right.
Sorry.
Yeah, no one can hear anything at all.
Like, can you disconnect? Yeah, probably need to disconnect from the laptop.
Oh.
No, it's still broken.
It's still. That's a good.
I would suggest that we start with Heike, and you probably reload the computer and then we try it again. So Anja, if you could bring on Loic and Heike, and Raffaela can do it again.
Yes. Great. Sorry for that. So yeah, I'm going to introduce our second speaker now, Heike Rapp. She's going to talk about the art of storytelling. So Heike is a senior design leader and design strategist. Her work has always focused on the wonder that makes us human and how we can humanize technology. So she's the VP of design at Colibra. That's a data intelligence company. She previously worked at Autodesk, where she created the brand strategy, global design language, and custom experience. She was also the first employee of allnavy.com, where she pioneered the retail experience. Now, I pass the mic to you, Heike.
Thank you. Okay, hi everyone. So today we'll talk about the art and science of storytelling. I hope audio, everything works fine. And that you can see the screen. Okay? Can someone just let me know if you can see the screen? All good? Right now I can see myself, so I just want to make sure.
No, you need to share the screen again, Heike, sorry.
Okay, cool. All right, good to know. So greetings from San Francisco, which I don't know if you heard yesterday, but we lived on Mars. It was very odd. Okay, share screen, share your screen, entire screen. And then, can we see it now?
Not yet, but I think if you're sharing, Anja, yep, there we go. Okay, cool. I'm
Okay.
getting out.
All right.
Have fun.
And then I had this thingy. Whoops. Good Lord, people. Okay, now we can see it. Yes? You got the recursion. Okay, here we are. I can see it. All
Yes,
right.
we can see
So
it.
hi,
Perfect.
everyone from San Francisco, where we're no longer on Mars, but it looks a little bit more like San Francisco. But I'm telling you, the fires are no good. But what can we learn from this? Let's not mess with nature too much. But today we'll talk about the art and science of storytelling. Subtitle is Why to Become a Customer Company. Thank you for the introduction. I also, at this point, want to thank my friend James Carney. He's a cognitive psychology. He and we did this talk. It was a workshop a few years ago, so it's heavily influenced by his work. All right. So what makes us human is not only our sophisticated use of language, it's really our ability to tell stories. And clearly, we've been doing storytelling for a long time, and we've all developed different storytelling mechanisms. I will end with the story of Prometheus. And actually, did you know that Frankenstein, subtitle there, is the modern Prometheus? That's now over 200 years old. So that's quite fascinating, because really Frankenstein, when you think about it, is how technology, humans came together, even if we talk about bioengineering. So it's fascinating times. Okay. Today, we will look at the art and science of storytelling in 5 chapters. First one is how stories immerse us, the emotional connections, how they unite actions and values, how stories simplify, and then how stories are constructed. And lastly, the moral of the story is every good story should have that. So let's start with stories immerse us. You really feel something when it's a good story. So a good story like this one creates an emotional connection. A story really brings us in, and a story also transports us into future, past, to all sorts of places. And the way stories do that is when we hear a story, when it's really good, it actually, physiologically, we release oxytocin, and then we really get in there with this emotional state, with the emotional connection. And over time, we almost become one with the hero, right? So when you see a movie and you don't want to stop, when you read a book, when you're really into this, it really is this emotional connection that you're just so immersed in this, you almost can't help yourself. But again, you become a little bit one with that hero. And that's why stories transport us. It's also interesting or important for us designers, especially. So when we think about telling the customer journey, how we create empathy, when it's a good customer journey to really draw you in, again, that's that moment when people will be able to identify with the hero in the journey when they release oxytocin, and it really draws them in and they have a deeper understanding. Now, stories unite values and actions. So this is a little movie that I want to show you, and just watch it. It's about 2 minutes. Just geometric forms, stuff is happening. So as you're watching this, the Haida symbol demonstration is from the 50s. Okay, so what can we learn from this? right? So who's the bad guy in all of this? Because for us, we put so much judgment in there. We constructed a whole story out of this, when in reality, it really is a two-dimensional plane and just some very basic geometric forms flying around. But again, it's almost, we can't help ourselves because we give it normative values and judgment. So why does this matter, values and actions? So our actions as humans, they're really justified by our values, and our values cause us to act. So that's the circle of how we're doing this. And the way that values and actions work, and the way we orient ourselves in the world, the mechanism to do this is story. So this is another example now of how the values and the actions are really linked by a totem pole, so to speak, again, representation of a story. So when you think about this, the values are really high up there, but they link us very much with the actions of today's world. I can give you another example that speaks more to it. Again, right, American totem. So again, the world of values up there linking us to our actions by way of storytelling into what we do every day. So here we go again. So really the construct of a story links the values and actions, and that helps us find our place in the world, orient ourselves in the world. The third chapter now is how we decomplexify, or how our stories can help us make more sense in the world. So us human beings, we've succeeded as a species by being social. As you can see in the background, there are other ways where groups can live in social settings. The one on the left, those are eusocial animals. So for example, ants and bees are like that. And they are eusocial, they have functional specialization. So that means that every individual in that group has a specific function assigned to them. And yes, they do get along, but they can only do one thing at a time. On the right-hand side, when we look at the herd and flock-based animals, they achieve their social being by agglomeration. That means they are stronger together, but they don't really have a structure. Both are good ways to get along in the world, but the animals, they can really do one thing at a time, either do their one specific task or hang out as a group. But we humans, we have actually found ways that we can be more than one thing and orient ourselves in the world in different ways. So how do we humans really do this? So we can specialize, as I said, but we're not confined by it. So for example, if I'm a designer, but I'm also an amateur flute player, other people might be writing, right? So we have many talents, and hopefully not doing more than one thing at the same time. But again, we have more talents, and we're not confined by specializing in only one task or being only a herd animal. So this illustration now shows you something called recursion. So let's say on the left here is our friend Mike, and Mike thinks about, he wants to go to dinner with his friend Jane. Now we go over, and there is his friend Mary, who thinks about Mike, and Mike, who wants to go out to dinner with Jane. That's the second recursion. Then it gets into Mike really thinking about what is she thinking about as I think about this. So in day to day, what helps is, for example, when you're in a meeting, you're thinking about, okay, this person, but how is this person connected to the other person? And then the layer on top and the layer on top. And why this is important is because when we track different roles, it really comes at a steep cost, right? Because we have to keep track of, okay, what was I thinking? What was the person thinking about me? What is the second person thinking about this, that, and the other? And we really need to keep track of what the roles are playing, what people are thinking, how it affects us as well. And why this is so complicated is, here you can see it, cognitive load. When we track mental states, recursion, I mentioned 0 is when I just think about myself. Okay, fair enough. Recursion 1 is when you think about someone else already. So this is second person gets involved. When you can see the group size go up, especially when it's too removed, you can see it goes up exponentially. So our cognitive load when tracking mental states, what other people are doing, becomes really high. And why this is also interesting in terms of storytelling is for Shakespeare, in some of his stories, sometimes that recursion is 9 levels deep, which is unbelievable, right? So to put that elegantly into a story that we can still understand it is remarkable. Also, more social humans or humans who have who are more apt at social connections or navigating those, they can go to recursion up to 4 or 5 times. But you can see the cognitive load is really tall. Now, what do we want to do? I was just saying that stories can help us with complexity. Entropy is a measure of predictability, right? So very predictable systems have low entropy, and very unpredictable systems have high entropy. What we want to get to is this predictability, because we don't really like to be in high entropy situations, as we just found out. Now, when we look at entropy as recursive tracking of mental states, that's a little bit different way of looking at it. So we saw that the cognitive load goes up really high when we have to think about all those people that are involved in it. But when we look at entropy now, the increase isn't exponential, this is logarithmic. So the instance, it's a little bit smaller and it doesn't continue to increase exponentially anymore. So that is to say, entropy is a better way of us humans tracking information, of making sense of this big world, of being able to get to a little bit better predictability. And how do we get to entropy? What we do is, to reduce entropy, we chunk information, we chunk it into little parts. We take information, we chunk it into little bits. And the way we do this, you guessed it, is storytelling, right? So a story has a beginning and end, a high point in the middle, like an opera, usually 3 acts. So for story, we do the same. And now let me tell you about the Agile model of narrative. Again, within the context of cognitive load being too high for us, we chunk information up, and this is the way we can construct a story. The Agile model of the narrative that was developed by a semiotic linguist in the 60s. It really is about a subject that does something, has an object, but then the subject has a helper. Of course, there's an opponent. Subject also has a sender, and the object has a receiver. So let's put this in context of a story that most of you know. Desire, alliance, and legitimacy. So you'll see. So for example, as we look at James Bond, let's take the example here. So Bond is the subject, we know this. And then his object is the protection of democracy. Now, James Bond's helpers is either Q, Bond girl, he has various helpers. And we know the opponent is either communism, terrorism that he needs to fight. For Bond, the sender is M, or the crown, to say, hey, Bond, we legitimize what you're doing, right? And the receiver over time is the British public or the Western world, because of course, Mr. Bond always finds a way out and saves the world. So that is why this Agile model is really useful. We can also, this is just in a table layout now, we can also look at different versions of this. So for example, as we look at a car company or religion, let's do this exercise briefly. You can even look at yourself. And when we did the workshop, what was also really helpful is, you know, who am I as a subject? What's my object? Who's my helper, my opponent? who's my sender receiver. So you can also look at yourself in the context of your work or even your company. But let's just bring this home a little bit more with examples. So if we look at a car company, right, the subject is the company itself. The object is transportation for humans. The helper is policy, lean manufacturing, good design usually. The opponent are competitors, oil prices. If ever we've lived through COVID, is also a huge opponent right now, right? Reliable public transport, cultural inertia, so you never know what your opponent could be. The sender is government, in this case, city of Detroit or any city where it's manufactured. US industrial tradition, so this is a US car company. The receiver is people of moderate income who might want a reliable car. So this is obviously not a high-end car company. If we now look at religion in this context, the subject is mankind. The object is salvation. Helper for Christianity is Christ. The opponent is Satan. The sender is Eve, original sin. And receiver, the saved elect. Now, you could do the same for you. You don't have to do it with Christianity. But like you see, it's a really helpful construct that you can construct your own story. Okay. Now, how are we with timing? I think we're good. The analogy now, the moral of the story is, out of all of this, Prometheus. So Prometheus, probably most of you know the story, but what happened was, so Prometheus back in the day, he stole fire. And fire is, well, it was provided by the heavens, right? But, he got punished by this. So Zeus sent down an eagle to pick out his liver because he wasn't supposed to steal fire and bring it to humans. He wasn't supposed to do this. So the analogy here is that Prometheus, he actually stole a technology, fire, and the eagle picking out his liver. For the Greeks, the liver was the seat of emotions. So Prometheus had to pay the price of not feeling emotions anymore, right? So he steals technology, and the price he has to pay is not being able to feel emotions anymore. And the moral of the story is really, if a company is to thrive, it needs to avoid having its liver eaten by eagles. So that really means is don't run after the shimmery, shiny technology for technology's sake, because it really, you will not be able to feel anything anymore, right? So blend the technological goals with the persistent awareness of the human dimension. And for us designers, we talk about human-centered design, right? It is balancing the quantitative with the qualitative as well. So really the recommendation is become an empathy-obsessed, design-driven company. Really learn the art of storytelling. We know now, by way of summary, it immerses us emotionally. There is a construct that we can use. We know even when we see simple things, we already create a story out of this. Stories as entropy reduction mechanisms that we can chunk information, and story to draw us in to go to explain how technology works, what it can do for us humans, and combining it this way. And that's really it. If you have any questions, I would love to hear from you. And thank you.
Thank you very much. I love the structure and all these concepts and with the data to back it up. So that was amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So yeah, just to remind you that please ask any questions on the comments. We will have a Q&A at the end. So yeah, don't hesitate to post comments and questions. So Raffaela is back, and everything is now.
I hope so. Do you hear me now?
Yes,
do you hear me?
Yes.
Ah, that's so good. I mean, it wouldn't be so easy if it worked in the first place, but yeah, let's give it a next try. I will now share my screen. Do you see that?
Yes, perfect.
Awesome, cool. So we can finally start. Thanks a lot. And yeah, cool. So thanks a lot for having me. Loic for the introduction, really, really good. And also Anya, Anna, and Alexander. We had a test before, but yeah, sometimes it's too easy. So it's a pleasure to be here to finally talk about my topic, which is the 5 archetypes of leadership. And I'm very excited about this topic. I will tell you why later. So let me initially tell you what's in it for you, right? So what are the topics I would like to cover? So first of all, I would like to talk about what is culture, what is organizational culture, and why is it even worth to talk about culture, and also leadership behavior, right? And why is it also important for you as product managers to talk about this? And as the title says, I will tell you a little bit how you can walk the talk and influence your culture and create awareness by making it visible. And I will show you a tool which is called the Organic Agility Archetypes, which will help you to discover some blind spots maybe, and to see new perspectives and new behaviors through reflection and learning. Great, but before I'm walking you through, I'd like to briefly introduce myself. So I'm Raffaela, I'm leadership and agile coach, as Loic already said, and definitely a product person. I started my journey years ago as a business development intern in a fast-growing startup. And I love to work with data, for sure, and emphasize with users and to work in product or with product and with the people. And guess what? Then I decided that I would like to work in product management. I did this for a couple of years, also as a product lead in many companies, startups, big enterprises, definitely e-commerce, and most of them retail. Yes, and I count myself very lucky to have been able to work in a great environment and to meet a lot of passionate and smart and talented people along my way, who definitely shaped my beliefs and helped me to make better decisions, who also mentored me and coached me and helped me to reflect and grow. And sometimes they also, you know, challenged me to go out of my comfort zone, to get used to this feeling of feeling uncomfortable sometimes. So for example, like today when the internet connection was broken. So I'm definitely very thankful for all these moments, feedbacks, and precious lessons, which ultimately influenced my way of becoming leadership and agile coach today. And you probably also know that every path has its puddle. And I also met some executives and leaders on my way who behave completely differently. And in an environment which were more about politics and policies and roles and responsibilities and a hierarchical structure. So more a push system than a pull system. And that created a system of work optimized for efficiency and utilization and also competition. So in hindsight, I'm very thankful for both moments. So both experiences. I personally witnessed different kind of company cultures, which were influenced by certain leadership behavior, and that behavior had an impact on the staff's behavior, right, and their orientation on how to be effective as well, and what the value drivers were. So today, as a coach, I'm working with many leaders, executives, teams, and individuals, helping them to grow their leadership capabilities and reflect, making their culture visible and explicit, and also rethinking the way they do strategy and moving their company slowly towards resilience. And resilience, I think, is one of the buzzwords of 2020 for sure. What says the dictionary? So it's the ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune and change. And this term comes from biology and is now completely arriving in our business context. And it describes organisms that can adapt to the new environmental condition, learn from failure, reorganize and recover, get better step by step. And what does it have to do with culture now and leadership? And why should you start to talk about culture and leadership per se? So let's go one step back. Today, organizations face a lot of challenges because the world around us is getting more complex and volatile. The landscapes are completely changing and the markets are volatile and changing dynamically. Complexity is increasing and prediction is not an option, right? You cannot create any plan for the next 5 years because this might change. So there are many unknowns of uncertainty. And also nobody expected 2020 to be the year we face a global pandemic and an economic crash, right? And I would like to quote too persons I like. So the German philosopher Josef Vogel, for example, stated that the corona crisis is a litmus test for societies like the educational system or the health system. And business advisor Barry O'Reilly put it very nicely on Twitter. He said, most people have viewed the coronavirus pandemic as a disruption, and it's actually not. It's an accelerant. And that's the point, right? To boil it down, the response and the reaction to uncertainty and unseen events is what's making the difference. Because companies who cannot really respond quickly to change and act like, on the left side, robust machines which mechanically execute plans, force people what they should do, driven by standardization and efficiency and rigid structures, they won't be able to defy the competition. Under changing conditions, it's beginning to crack and it's becoming fragile, right? And you are stuck. So the metaphor needs to shift towards the right side, so towards an organism which is evolving with the environment. So a network that interacts and adapts through collaboration, through learning, through situational decision-making, and it becomes better and more resilient day by day. So how can you, from the leadership perspective, support your organization to build resilience? So, and how can you support this metaphor shift? I would like to tell a story, actually. This is one thing we're doing today. Just imagine your company's performance is decreasing and you can't seem to turn it around. So the team morale is low and every day new incidents occur and new issues occur and your employees are not really willing to take over ownership and some of them are even leaving the company. And what are the leaders doing? They're creating new plans, implementing new structures and roles and action plans and task forces, or even a bonus, but it doesn't seem to move the needle or impact the team's buy into the strategic vision. So why is that? It probably relates to culture. So the way people think and the leadership behavior, which is not addressing the root cause of the performance, the beliefs that guide the action. And I would like to explain it very briefly by this model I'm using also with my clients. And it starts on the right top side with the vision, something you have in your mind, right? So it can be the product vision, can be the company vision. It's a shared understanding of where you would like to be in the future. And you're breaking it down in order to get there into smaller chunks, into goals, which will hopefully bring you closer to your vision. And you aim to reach your goal through results, right? And the results are the consequences of actions you take in every team member of your company. And these actions are based on decisions you take and people take and motivated by the beliefs they hold onto what they should do and what they shouldn't do. And these beliefs are created by the experiences. So when we are looking now at the upper part of the pyramid here, so the actions and the results can be managed, can be delegated and controlled through an organizational structure like processes and tools and roles, you name it. And the lower part of the pyramid, so the beliefs and actions, represent an organizational culture which cannot be managed nor designed. And culture is also not a static definition you sometimes see in office kitchens. That's really interesting, because culture is something you breathe in the very first minute of a company. It can be the way you take decisions. It can be the way how you give feedback, or even dress code can be something. And it's rather dynamic and an ever-changing interaction of relationship. And it definitely takes time to change the company's culture. And to do that, you need to start a conversation, right? You need to create awareness around it to make it explicit and influence it from the leadership perspective. And well, also one thing here is that you're managing things, you're leading people, and that sounds so easy. But I can tell still in 2020, many managers and executives unfortunately hold on to legacy thinking, outdated methods, and telling people exactly what to do and when by commanding and controlling, and thereby also limiting the potential of the whole company. They create action plans and new policies, new procedures, new organizational structures, and in hopes of transforming the results. but not really changing the way people think, right? So they might be stuck in the industrial age and Taylorism, and are not, or they're making the mistake of working on the pyramid's action layer and not down here. But we're now in 2020, and it's the age of knowledge work, right? So meaning we're applying knowledge rather than manual skill or muscle to work. That's what Peter Drucker said. And our environment is increasing and getting more volatile and uncertain. So you cannot command and control or supervise your knowledge worker. It kills all innovation, creativity, motivation, and commitment. So you have to start at the bottom to get to the top. So this is the most important point here. And the key message is that effective leaders create new experiences that reinforce cultural beliefs, that drive action and deliver the desired results and improve the organizational outcomes. And this is why I'm saying it again, you manage things, you lead people. That doesn't mean that you're not managing anymore. It's still, both is still important, but you're leading people. And here the role of leadership is the capability to influence and inspire others, to move towards a common goal, to define a purpose, to provide context and explain the why behind it, right? And then create a system of work that enables people to achieve the desired outcome. Making other people successful is one of my sense I really like, by helping them to discover new opportunities, for example, by experimenting and guiding them along the way. And counterintuitively also reducing the control. So letting go of old habits and empower people to take over control on their own and make their own decisions autonomously. And this is based on shared beliefs and skills they acquire over time through coaching, facilitation, and mentoring. And it sounds so easy, but what happens, for example, when you're looking here at the picture, if the hand is cutting all the strings from one day to another, and the learned helpless workforce of, the little puppets who forgot to problem solve for themselves is now requested to self-organize. So that probably leads to motivation, adapt, and panic. And you need to help them from the leadership perspective to build these muscles again, right? To start moving the hand and the feet to do this slowly on their own, and to increase the autonomy and reduce the level of control. This is it. And I will now show you a tool which you can use in order to do that. So it's called the 5 organizational archetypes, which is actually something resulting from working with various companies and leaders. And we identified 5 archetypes, which illustrate the connection between the leaders, the followers' behavior, the organizational structure, and culture. And these archetypes are completely generic. We're using this for recognition only in the first place and can be completely adapted to your context. This is important. And so I will now introduce you the 5 archetypes, and the level of autonomy increases while the level of control is decreasing. So the first one is the expert. The expert is the leader of the group, who is the functional and technical expert, and the one here in the blue bubble. The person is making the decision, defining what to do, and even maybe sometimes how to do it. And the group members have a one-on-one connection and are focusing on the relationship with the leader. So it goes from individual group member to the leader and back. There's little collaboration within the group, because they are all expected to deliver according to the leader's expectations, right? Because they would like to comply. As a result, there is a high degree of specialization in the group and minimal overlap in the work between the people. So the leadership behavior tends to drive specialization and hinder collaboration, and the overall autonomy is really low. The next one is the coordinator. The leader takes responsibility for, he's now or she is now in the middle for making sure the group works together effectively, and also encourages some degree of collaboration between the group, because it's now creating more value and making sense that they're even not going directly to the leader, but are coordinating themselves. And yeah, the communication, decision-making responsibilities are still retained by the leader. And you see this little flash here. So if the group is not used to collaborate with each other, conflicts will inevitably emerge. So there's one skill definitely necessary in this archetype, which is conflict resolution. So this is something really important for the leader. The next one is the peer. Now you see that the peers within the group, and we have now here the potential that this is not a group, but it's a team, and synergy is emerging. So also shared decision-making is now happening, and peer-to-peer feedback, and the role of the leader is to support the team by sharing the goal and the purpose, by helping them also to take decisions collaboratively. So this is a skill which is important. And if the team, for example, takes a decision and now the leader has a veto, that can also cause motivational doubt, which you need to be aware of. The next archetype is the coach. So here you see that the leader is outside of the team and is the coach. That means that the coach is not involved anymore in the operative work. The group works autonomously and self-organized and independently, and the coach is responsible to bring the team forward, also on the individual level, on the team dynamic and development level, but also to benchmark them in terms of performance and how to bring them further. Here, an important skill is that the leader should help the team to give, for example, constructive feedback, right? Because something I recognized is it's not so difficult to receive feedback. It's difficult to give good feedback. The next archetype is the strategic archetype. Here you see that every bubble is now blue, because leadership here is more a shared function than a role. And leadership here is fluid. So depending upon the situation, who is able to lead, maybe it's, I'm very good in this topic, so I can lead my team and I'll bring you forward. And everybody understands the strategy and also the contribution to the company's value creation and the impact on the activities on the market. So the leader here is more the connection towards the outside world, the external view, and that the organizational strategy and the feedback from the team is happening. And the team, or here the self-organization goes beyond team boundaries. Yeah, so these are the archetypes. And what are we doing now with that? So what am I doing with this kind of tool? So the goal is, and the challenge is to reflect, right, on your leadership behavior, your culture and your structure, and how is this impacting your team and your culture, and how does it work in practice? So actually, there is a technique we use, which is also based on narratives, also based on storytelling. And so it starts with asking the participants, so it can be a team, it can be a leadership team, to write stories of success and failure on Post-its or on Miro, we don't mind. And we're using different color codes. So for example, green for success here and pink for failure. And it's completely up to you if you, so it's about your perception of success and failure. There's no right and wrong. And then the next step would be that we're mapping the stories onto the archetypes. And this is now very interesting, because then the reflection starts. So we normally, as an external, with the external perspective, we ask then the team or the participants, what do you see? Do you see any patterns? And for example, you can also then see that some archetypes are associated with the success, some of them with failure. What does that show us? This is our question. And sometimes also, they associate stories of success and failure with the same archetypes, or with completely different one. And you can also see or recognize if the group, for example, feels uncomfortable with high autonomy, or maybe it favors it. And how is the leader behaving? And there's a tip, sometimes we're doing this like that we're separating the leader from the group in order to compare the perspectives. And if in the very end you don't see any patterns, that can be also a hint that there is a very fragmented and incoherent culture. So that's also very interesting and something to discuss. So the next point, the fourth point, is the transition, because now you reflected, you had a discussion, now you can decide, and this is this is the time when we're jumping in to start the transition. So you see probably the most common and successful archetype, and that's then the path towards the change. And I can talk forever about this topic, but it's definitely here about adopting more some of the behaviors of the desired archetype, and then unlearning or doing less of the ones you are not. And generally, the aim is to move towards the direction of more autonomy, especially when you're a knowledge worker. And it's about to create this learning moments by starting the conversation with your team. You will be able to drive a change, and it's the conversation here and the reflection what matters, and the detection of patterns and the process itself. So you will be able to also break behaviors and your patterns. And there is one thing, and this is why you need to use this tool also with caution. It's not that everybody should evolve from the expert to the strategist archetype. It's completely depending on your context, right? And it must be coherent with your structure and your culture. So you need to be careful also with cutting all the strings at the same time, because this could also lead to motivational depth. So you need to do it step by step. And an external view for sure is helpful. And I would definitely say it's very motivating to see then in this process growing teams out of their comfort zone, and also that leaders are then starting to role model and unlearning unwanted behavior, showing vulnerability. It's also a topic, and slowly changing their behavior towards the next archetype. Really, really good. Takeaways. So what are the takeaways for today? So number one is, in order to stay competitive, companies should develop resiliently in times of increasing complex world. And resilience can by no means be ordered and must be lived and learned, especially also culture, right? And that requires a suitable leadership behavior that promotes the autonomy of the team. You cannot control or design a cultural change, but you can influence it, measure changes, and make it explicit. And I said it already, there is no one-fits-all solution. It's about the process. And to support this process, we're using tools like the organic leadership archetypes, but there are more for sure. And it's about the journey here to grow resilience, autonomy, and to move out of your comfort zone. And sometimes that feels uncomfortable. And you may notice that I nudged you also today a little bit out of your comfort zone and outside the box, because how does it feel to look at the slide? I mean, your brain wants to fix it, right? The writing goes beyond the colored box, and you're starting to feel uncomfortable. And this was my goal. I wanted you to experience also feeling uncomfortable, because we possess a natural tendency to stay comfortable, to stick with the status quo, because we're sometimes also afraid to try something new. But if you're uncomfortable with discomfort, you probably run away from uncertainty and change. And in today's disruptive and accelerating world, you can run away from change. And you also need to reframe it, this discomfort, as a positive source of growth. So growth mindset is also a topic. And I'm, for example, also very, very happy to be here today, because probably without Corona, I wouldn't have had the opportunity. Really good. And also this issue with my internet. Oh, wow. I definitely need to check that now and to have the best internet connection in the world. So I would like to come back to my personal story. So with the knowledge of, with today's knowledge, I really realized how fortunate I was with so many, that I met so many great leaders and colleagues who helped me to see my blind spots and my biases, and who helped me to create new habits and a new way of thinking. And I really like this metaphor, who also spread the seeds, right, to grow my skills as a product manager and a coach today. And it's not about only the hard skills, but especially also the soft skills, which are equally important to be a successful product manager. So, for example, empathy really makes a difference, because you're not a line manager. There's no disciplinary authority. You need to talk, you need to communicate and understand the other's perspective. For example, through active listening, you are also practicing this. And also communication skills are really important. So telling a story, inspire others, leading by influence, because you are, providing a shared understanding of what the vision is and the purpose is, and you're helping your team to focus on the big picture. And you also need to earn and build trust, and this is for sure something I realized when I was working in a performant and functional team. Trust is also very important. So I'm very intrigued by this topic and also growing others, and it's motivating me to see other people's motivation. And so this is why I also invite you to reflect a little bit. And I hope that I spread some seeds today and inspire some of your product people, leaders, teams, executives, and individuals to start reflecting also on your leadership behavior, your culture, and your structure. And if you find this interesting, you could do two things. Number one is check this book, which is called Organic Agility Foundations Handbook. It's about culture, leadership, and resilience. And I also love the phrase, don't copy the tools, copy the principles, because there are also 5 underlying principles next to the leadership model in it. And the number 2 is you can always reach out to me. I know that we are all used to, QR codes, number 1 feature of this year. So take a picture, add me, and drop me a line if you have any question. And also, if you want to, if you're in Cologne, let's have a coffee. And thanks a lot for your attention. Yeah.
Hi, cool. Thank you very much. I'm not back because something broke, but rather for starting the Q&A. So thanks to the 2 of you. That was super interesting topics. In the beginning, I thought, how do I connect those topics? But you made it much easier for me now, since both topics have something to do with leadership, with creating a story, with storytelling. And that's also why the first question I would have, I would start asking Raffaela, but Heike, if you want to add something to that, feel free to do so. So in Heike's talk, we heard a lot about storytelling and that leaders need to have that storytelling aspect to build trust and everything. So Raffaela, the first question for you would be, how would you evaluate the importance of storytelling to exactly build that environment that you mentioned, that people within your team can feel safe and that they feel empowered? Like, do you have any tangible advice you can have on either on the one hand side on what's important when it comes to storytelling, but also how can we all get better in our storytelling?
Yeah, so these are actually 2 questions, right? I cannot see, by the way, the screen, but you can hear me, right? I don't know, something.
Yes, we see.
Okay, great. So as I said, storytelling, and this is something which is really important, because then the person who's sitting next to you can also empathize a little bit and understand more. And it's also, as a product lead or a leadership, it's also important to share these kind of stories. And this is why we're using, for example, tools like the Archetypes, which is also based on storytelling, in order to start this connection. But there are also other things. For example, when it comes to decision making, how are we taking decisions collaboratively? So this is something which is creating empathy. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And nice. If I can add.
Sure. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Just a few things. So, Raphael, I love what you said. You also talked about, as humans, we don't really want to change, yet change is constant, right? So storytelling is also really helpful. You said empathy, but getting those concepts across, right? So as entropy reduction devices, because for people to understand complex theories, or especially as maybe if the business model is changing, if the company is growing, right? So it really helps to put it in context that everyone can understand this. And even at the very basic level, there's a certain story about why we exist, what we're doing, and how we're going about it. That should not change. right? So it's almost, you know, your archetypical fairy tale or business story that shouldn't change, but that on top of that, to build that out with other stories of what's coming and why, I think it's really helpful to get people more comfortable in those changing times and to be able to deal with all the stuff that's going on.
Nice. That very well connects to the first question we had on YouTube to you, Heike.
Yeah.
So getting more into the mindset of product leaders, product managers, or design leaders, I think is kind of the same thing. What do you see the main obstacles or challenges teams or those leaders of the teams face on a daily basis? And do you have any tips on overcoming these? The question is asked by Sema from YouTube.
Yeah, no, so shall we start with the overuse of PowerPoints? No, you know, so I mean, I showed a PowerPoint as well, but it's really, when you think about it, is how much information sometimes people throw on this, and they overwhelm you. And we know cognitively you can't even read it, right? So a little bit, it's sometimes we're in our own way, but then also obstacles that I've seen is mostly not having a storyteller in the company. So a few companies ago, we actually at Autodesk, we did hire a storyteller whose function it really is to work with C-level, with other leaders to really come up with a clean story that it holds true, that it's also not, you know, so much information thrown at a person, but that the story really flows through it. And a lot of times, if you want to get a storyteller, and Raffaela, like it with the archetypes as well, right? So the one who combines it all. Look for people who have been in the movie industry, who have been in game design, right? Because their story is so important, because we know, you know, a good movie really immerses you emotionally, and so does a story, even when it's, or especially, I should say, when it's told by the CEO, by the C-level, by your product managers, right? So the more they can embrace it, the better. And I'm not saying you can get from 0 to 100 immediately. All of us can try to do it a little bit better. And there are great tools out there that you can either take storytelling classes. Writing is always good to structure your thoughts. I have to do a lot of that myself. But yeah, so do that. Start slowly, get into it. Show an interest, right? Because we can, like I said, 0 to 100 doesn't work. But yeah, just see what works or what has resonated with you and try to analyze it.
Raffaela, you want to add something to that? Like any tips for product managers on how to step up their game when it comes to storytelling?
I think it's about to create this vision in their head, right? So I told my team that I'm successful when I'm on holiday, and you know exactly what to do because you know where we're going, right? Because we're sitting together in this ship, right? And I'm telling the story that we're going to this island, and there's this lighthouse, and you know where it is, and you know what we have in mind, and I'm always trying to motivate them, to inspire them. I set some constraints, so this is something you should do when in your story. So set constraints, but show them the direction, and give them the space to create this learning moments and to experiment with that. And that's, I think, very powerful. So from the product manager perspective, if you're able to inspire and to, that everybody knows where we're going, and this actually worked. So when I was going on holiday, maybe not the first one, but then later I felt good because I know, my team knows what we're doing and where we're heading to.
Nice. Yeah. When we're talking about being part of a team, you also showed that 5 archetypes of how is someone leading a team. The question again from YouTube, and this time it was Steph was asking the question, like, which of those 5 archetypes is a product manager together with the dev team? Like, how would you put that into perspective? Or could they be multiple things in different scenarios? Like, give us a bit of insight in that direction, please.
Yes, sure. And that's a good question, right? And I'm hearing this very, very often. And of course, depends on your context and where you are. So basically, as a product manager, you probably are working in a group of knowledge workers. So you're not using your muscles, you're using your brain, right? And this is why it's important to create this autonomy, to give them the space. I mean, there's even, I forgot the name. I think Daniel Pink mentioned it in a really, really nice talk about intrinsic motivation, that you're losing 20% of your IQ if you're under stress. So yeah, now I forgot what I wanted to say, my train of thoughts, but yeah, generally it's about the autonomy in the team. So and this is why it probably makes sense that, for example, if you're looking at the coach archetype, that this is the Scrum team, right? And the coach is supporting not only the team members, the developers, but also the product owner and driving you forward. But I also have seen, and I was also part of a very functional team and a performance team where everybody was in charge of the strategy and everybody knew where to go, but this takes some time to go there. And you probably go through different kind of phases, like, norming, storming, and all these things in order to get there. But you definitely need to create this space and this autonomy. And there's no one fits all solution. It depends on your context. This is something I need to say again, but it's probably the case that you're more in this coach archetype or strategic archetype when you're dealing with knowledge.
That's probably also the interesting part about being a product leader. Like, you have several hats that you need to wear in several different situations. Nice. Yeah. I think we have a couple of more minutes, so I would have two more questions. One for you, Heike. So you were talking about entropy and how we can use the knowledge about entropy by making also products or stories easier to understand towards our users, our listeners, and the audience. Coming back to the digital product side, you work for SAP, for example, where they probably have a lot of very feature-heavy B2B products that are, in the beginning, probably hard to understand for users. Could you share a bit of your experience on how you dealt with those complications or challenges on how to make SAP products better with entropy in mind?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, thank you. I think in general, most enterprise resource software is hugely complex, right? It's almost its nature. So it's not just SAP. Also companies that have a long legacy, right? I know even where I work right now, I mean, dealing with data, Raffaela, you said you like dealing with data. I mean, I'm just getting into that field. It's absolutely amazing, right? But so what can we do to reduce complexity? Because even when I worked in e-commerce, which is also a complex field, so as designers in general, we always try to make sense out of stuff that is presented to people, that they can find their way through it, right? That they're not confused, they don't know what to do, they're not annoyed. And especially then, so when you're dealing with a system that has grown over time, that is so complex that only the insiders use it. So how can we reduce the entropy? Again, that people can predict what's coming, right? So in the essence of how can we apply storytelling to design, which is every user experience, user interaction, designer knows, we have to come up with a system. I mean, even if it's, navigation, where's the navigation? How does it work? How does it become intuitive? How can we predict what is happening? How can we make sense that in the user journey, in that end-to-end story, we know what the persona, the person wants to do, and then how can we give them the contextual tools that they can get there to create their own story in this context? And I mean, retooling is never simple. But I think, Raffaela, you also mentioned the strong notion of a vision. We really have to show that vision and make it visceral. Again, good storytelling to say these are all the pain points that the person is doing right now. And I even did this for a CMO, right? It was a simple sketch that she showed on stage to say, this is what our customer is going through. Can you believe it? And everyone's, oh, right? So really making it visceral and then all working together on, okay, what can we change? What can we make better? That we get this, that everyone can create their own story within the context of those complicated systems. And that's why also listening to people is super important. You know, storyteller, but I think equally as important is listening. So what are people saying? What are they doing? What's actually happening? Observing, right? So research, super important. So I hope that answered it.
I actually want to
add something?
Yeah, I would like to add something. It's really interesting, Heike, what you were saying. And I think when I was a product leader, I also thought about how can I support my product managers to also, you know, and we're talking a lot now about storytelling, but I would like to bring in leadership as well here, and this culture of sharing your vision, right, and leading through influence. Yeah. And we had a situation with a team. And then the team said, oh, yeah, we have a review and we need to tell them a very technical thing. It was about load balancing. So very, very technical. And then I asked him, OK, if you need to, you know, to tell a kid, what are you doing? So actually, could you maybe find an example? And then they said, yeah, that's interesting. OK, we need to think through it. And then they came up with this idea of demonstrating in front of the, you know, the other teams and the stakeholders, load balancing. Like, okay, now we have 5 bottles of milk, and they actually brought it into this meeting. And now it's really easy. So reducing the load, and it's now a lot more performant. We have only 2, and everybody was clapping. And I said, now you know what storytelling is all about, because now everybody understands where you're heading to. Yeah.
Nice.
Nice.
Simple.
I couldn't find a better end to that. Cool. Thank you very much. Let's bring all the other organizers into the meeting, and thanks for answering the questions of our audience on YouTube and myself. And I want to thank everyone for making that ProductTank happen and a success. We had a couple of hiccups in the middle, but that's totally fine. Super interesting stuff. I learned a lot. I hope everyone in the call learned a lot as well. And see you soon.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.